I would rather have a dream purpose rather than a dream job because a dream job is basically it constrains you to a corner here. Well, a dream purpose can expand. That's my goal.
Welcome to the Final Round podcast, where our mission is to help you knock out the competition and land your dream job. Our bonus episode today features Dr. Eli Joseph, an author, educator, TEDx speaker, faculty member at Columbia University and Queens College, and a partner and medical examiner at ExamOne. His new book, The Perfect Rejection Resume, compiles lessons about failure from his own life and those of influential thought leaders. Get ready to have a deep conversation about overcoming rejection and failure. Here are some questions we'll be answering. What's a rejection resume? How do you use rejection to fuel your professional achievements? Are there any ways to bend the rules in your favor? What are some reasons why your dream job may be out of reach? What's going on with the Great Resignation? And what are the takeaways from the book, The Perfect Rejection Resume? Let's dive in. And welcome back to the Final Round podcast. We are tuning live from the Final Round studio, and our guest just joined us today. So Dr. Eli Joseph, how are you doing today, and where are you tuning in from?
I'm doing great, AJ. Thank you for having me. I am doing wonderful. I am based in New York City, Brooklyn, New York, to be specific. But what I also do is I teach at Columbia University. I am also a partner at Quest Diagnostics. So I'm in New York City trying to stay productive.
Awesome. Well, we were just talking right before we hit record. We were talking about weather, and over here in Los Angeles, it's a bit chilly. It's pretty blustery and cloudy. I know on the East Coast, there's a heat wave. So hopefully you're staying indoors and not getting too hot outside. But I'm really excited to dive in. I think for all of our listeners who just hit play and are listening to this episode, I hope they can get ready for a very authentic episode around the world of rejection and how you really can combat rejection, because not enough people talk about it. And trust me, from my experience, I know from your experience, life is not always the wins and the positive days. There's a lot of down days and a lot of rejection. So I'm super excited to dive in. And I first actually wanted to talk about what's going on in the job market today. And I understand that we are undergoing something called the Great Resignation, where employees are leaving jobs at alarming rates. But the reality is that job seekers are facing a wildly different reality. And there's a statistic from Harvard Business School that companies reject as many as 27 million US workers. So there's actually the Great Rejection. So what is going on in the job market today from your eyes?
We have an influx of jobs that are available. And what we know is that there's a shortage to fill those jobs up with candidates here. But then again, at the same time, we do have a very great pool of qualified candidates. And I say they're the top 10, top 20% that are getting access to all of these opportunities. And what about the other 80 to 90%? And, we have this disconnect here. And that's what's going on in the job market, where there's a disconnect between the average employees and even the qualified employees that are qualified for those roles and the employers that hold these roles. And it's funny because I'm actually writing an article where, these employers are holding on to these jobs and they're waiting for that perfect candidate to fill those roles. And, in reality, no one's perfect here. So there's a big disconnect between the employers and the people that are applying for those roles. And this is where the rejection resume, and I think marketing your failures comes into play here rather than just marketing your success.
So let's talk about that, because I know that you are someone who coined the term the rejection resume, and you recently wrote a book, and the book is titled The Perfect Rejection Resume, a reader's guide to building a career through failure. And in this book, I understand that you dive super deep into the rugged mindset of using failure to accomplish one's goal by any means. So what is a rejection resume? And maybe if you can share more about what is this book about?
So we know what a traditional resume is basically a resume that highlights our success and what we have accomplished throughout our academic careers or our professional careers. A rejection resume is the complete opposite, where we are sharing our failures. We're sharing what we struggled with. We're sharing all of our, whether it's professional, academic, personal, we're sharing the things that we failed at. And we're not only posting it on our resume and, putting it underneath the rug and hiding it, we're sharing it, and we're sharing stories behind what we have learned from our failures here. And that's what a rejection resume is all about.
And what do you do with a rejection resume? Do you keep it as internal motivation for yourself? Do you share it with an employer?
I keep it as not only an internal motivation, but it's also a way to right my wrongs and to keep track of, and it's a ledger to keep track of what I've done wrong and to correct that. So if there's other opportunities in the future, I can take those lessons I've learned from the past and have a better outcome in the future. Not only that, I may not share it with my employer while I'm applying for a job. However, I can share it with my network on social media to say, hey, I may have been accomplished in this area, but I have struggled in many other areas before. And I would like to share my story and my perspective in hopes to have a better outcome, not only for on my end, but for those who are viewing and those who are interested in reading about my story as well. So it's more so of a marketing tool where I can use to say, hey, I'm great at this, but I am brave enough to share my struggles and my failures as well and have a dialogue going.
So how I understand it, you said talk about what you have done well or you succeeded in, then talk about some things that maybe you've failed at or maybe you've gotten rejected with. But then the last key piece is the key takeaways from what you have been rejected from. Is that correct? Kind of that three-part process of actually making a rejection resume?
Yes, it's a three-part process. Not only going to create it, we're going to reflect, right? And on top of that, we're going to use it and apply it towards the future and analyze the situation, use that situation and move forward and be open to not only update your traditional resume, but update your rejection resume as well. So that way you can keep the lessons flowing through that. And then not only that, we're doing a tit for tat basically. So whatever you have succeeded in, you also have to have a story that you failed in. So that way you can use that as fuel to motivate you in the future and succeed in the future as well.
And I think it's a great, topic to be discussing today because I've seen, and obviously I call myself a power user on LinkedIn as a LinkedIn content creator, as I know you're very active on LinkedIn as well. And I think, yesterday, all the content was about, I'm happy to announce this, or I can't believe I got accepted into this school or this business school, whatever it may be. And that was yesterday. Today, you still see some of those posts, but a lot of it is more about being real with your audience, with your network, with your followers, and maybe sharing some rejection. It shouldn't all be rejection, but talking about maybe applying to some Ivy League schools, getting rejected, what you've learned from it, and then using that to get to the next place. And I've seen, for instance, there was a post about someone applied to all of the Ivy League schools, got rejected from all of them. The post went viral, and I can only imagine how many maybe college admissions directors reached out, or if it was the same thing for a job, I applied to all of the FANG companies, the Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and I got rejected, and then people reach out. How do you best advise our audience to use the rejection resume in their marketing approach in social media?
So it's funny to add on to your point, graduation, we're in the midst of graduation. At Columbia, we done graduated students all week. And everyone is excited. They're sharing their portrait, right? But they don't really share the stories of failure, the all-nighters, failing stories. And to your point, I've always loved a comeback story. Everyone loved that comeback story where you have failed at all the tech companies, and then next thing you know, it went viral, and then you're receiving all these opportunities. So this is how I would tell someone, or I would advise someone to share their story. I would use a jab, then a hook. And I think Gary Vaynerchuk used that method as well, where you would jab at something. You would post a teaser. You would post the fact that you failed at something recently, right? And then you see how the traction comes about when it comes to that status. And then you add a little bit more into that story, the story of rejection. You add a little bit more of that story of rejection. And once you feel comfortable, then you can share that document of rejection resume that you have accumulated over the past, 5-10 years, and then watch all the influx of comments, the likes, the shares, and you can capitalize off of that. And it's basically momentum. You're building up momentum to share that document, and you're using that document to say, okay, you know what? I have a resume. I'm proud of my resume and my traditional resume, but I'm also proud of my rejection resume that I've learned over the years. So you're basically using that small, we're taking baby steps. We're going to walk. We're going to use one status of a failure over time. Then we're basically growing into 10, 15, and next thing you know, you have a rejection resume to share with your audience, and then all the opportunities are coming in.
I totally agree with you that people gravitate towards comeback stories, right? Nobody wants somebody from day one to have every single success and no challenges, because at the end of the day, that's not reality, and especially for a majority of the people out there, including myself, including yourself. And we'll talk about kind of your story in a second. But I think, really do a deep dive, especially even if you got that job. Think about how many jobs you got rejected from. Even if you got that dream school, how many schools did you also get rejected from? And the next 20 things, next 20 categories of applying to things. So I do like the idea of being authentic and transparent with your network. And like you said, and especially since this is a podcast with some boxing elements, you said jab, jab, hook, which works perfectly for the knockout punch for the Final Round podcast. And, one more thing on this topic, Eli, is that you could think also about one day, as in one day, I hope to be a student at Columbia. And then when you get the offer letter, it's here's day one. So one day it's a dream versus day one, it's reality, and being honest with your network, which I love how you shared more about that. And to stay on the topic of your book for one more second, I saw that your book includes inspiring tips from today's career trailblazers. So what are some of the biggest tips that you can share with our audience?
So the biggest tip that I can share with my audience and your audience as well, our audience, is to find others that have that same mindset, that are not afraid to share their failures. I mean, we're talking about when I've gotten the rejection resume from Rashad Lambert, who is currently the senior vice president at Forbes, it was different because I'm like, wow, okay, I thought my rejection resume looked bad, but look at his. And when I got the rejection resume from Dr. Janice Gasson, it was like, okay, wow, so I'm not the only one. I realized that I'm not the only one who have failed before. And the concept of that rejection resume, it gravitates towards us because we succeeded a lot. We have been successful in our endeavors, but we have also that little to no light on how we've got to that point up until, when we were creating that resume. So the tip for our listeners is to find other people that are willing to tag along that journey, and not in a way of, okay, you know what, you have your own path, everyone have their own path, everyone have their own lane. However, you're basically going in the right direction. And there's another tip from the book: direction is much more important than speed, right? And when we think of going in the positive direction, that's one key indicator that we're doing something positive for ourselves. However, we don't have to rush. There's no way to rush. And on top of that, when we're rushing, you have to understand that time can be our ally and it can also be our enemy as well. So the tip to our listeners is find other people that are in the grind, that are in the trenches with you, and that are struggling to succeed at a goal that they have been working on for quite some time, and build on that. Build on that so that way, when the final round comes about, you're ready. And not only have you been endured and you have endurance, you also have the stamina to basically get through that final round.
I can already tell you that we're going to clip that quote that you said for probably our hook of this episode. And just to repeat it so the audience says it, and maybe even go back 15 seconds, listen to it again. You said direction is more important than speed. And I've actually never heard that. And I love that because it's not just about being first, even in business. It's not about just being, the first mover, right? Or having that advantage, but it's also making sure you're going in the right direction. And as a job seeker, you don't want to just be be as quick as possible to apply to a million jobs, but are you going in the right direction? And maybe taking a step back, trying to figure out what you want to do first before rapid fire applying, which we talk about on the show a lot, where it's not the best, focus on networking, not just applying to a million jobs. So direction is more important than speed, which I love. Great quote. And then you said, find others in the trenches and find people who have the same mindset as you. So if I'm someone in the audience of the final round and I'm loving this episode, and maybe I just left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, which hopefully our audience has done already, how do they go about finding those people? Because it could be a little bit difficult to find someone's motivation on social media without meeting them first.
Okay, so I like to use A/B testing as well in business, as far as testing which post works well for me. So if I post something, right, I'll just post, let's say, an affirmation, and someone comments, "Hey, I feel the same way." Okay, all right. So now that's an indicator saying, okay, you know what, that person can potentially be in the trenches, and they have that same energy that resonates with me at the moment, at the time that I posted something. okay, so I can connect with them in a way. If I'm not connected with them already, I can connect with them, and then I'll start off say, hey, I appreciate you for commenting and showing love on my post. How are you feeling today? How's everything going? You have that dialogue going. You realize that there are more and more people that are in the trenches than you think, especially within your network. There's a reason why people are following you. There's a reason why people have connections to you, because you serve as a purpose. So when I find people, I never knew that there are thousands of people that are in the trenches. So when I say, here's a rejection resume from AJ, and you're like, wow, okay, let me read on AJ's story real quick, his story and his background, and see if we can have a connection. And then it builds up from there. So just finding out who likes the stories, who engages with your post, who engages with your story, because we all use social media in some way, shape, or form. It's finding out who can engage with your story and your background, and then figuring out how you can connect and move forward from there.
And I love what you said, because originally I thought that you were talking about reaching out to, let's say, 100 people and then trying to gauge if they're in the trenches, trying to gauge their mindset, trying to see if you have any similarities. And that to me is going in the wrong direction, but it's going faster, right? The speed. But if you take a step back, reassess your direction, right? As you said, direction more important than speed, and put yourself out there in a post, let's say on LinkedIn, talking about how maybe you're a transfer student and how it's been very challenging, and how maybe you got rejected from a school, but now you just transferred over, which is actually part of my story. I got rejected from USC, went to community college for a year, and then transferred, and maybe starting a small community of fellow transfer students, people who are in the process of transferring and who have already transferred, gauging people's interests, and then letting them come to you in the bottom of the post, asking who else is in this process, who else is dealing with these challenges, see who comments, and then reach out to those people. So it's more of an inbound approach than outbound, which I like. And you said A/B testing. And I know for some of our audience, maybe who is in the marketing side of a company, knows a little bit more about A/B testing. But for you, can you share what is A/B testing and how our audience can use it to their benefit?
So I'll use the rejection resume as an example here for A/B testing here. So I have a rejection resume. I know my story, right? I understand that around this time, people are graduating. And I'm going to share a post. I'm going to share one post today about being rejected at Columbia University and end up teaching at Columbia University, and see who likes that particular post, see who understands, who can vibe with that post. That's for today. Then tomorrow, I'm going to take it a step further and say, okay, I've graduated with my doctorate degree. However, been rejected at Columbia University for a postdoctorate role. See who understands, who vibes with that post, and then you see that connection, and you understand and analyze both posts, see who engages the most, and then you can also form a tribe that way. That's the A/B testing, just trying to figure out same context, same topic, to see which of the posts you can get the most connection from, and you can build it from there. And you can get connections from both posts as well, get engagement from both posts, and then you can use it to market yourself. You're basically marketing yourself to say, okay, you know what, I have accomplished so much. However, I'm going to show you the other side before anyone else can. I want to see who's brave enough to share their story with me as well.
And I think it's so important to use A/B testing in anything that you do, especially if you don't know what the right direction is yet. So again, going back, and I think the theme of this episode will be direction is more important than speed. When you don't know what direction to go to yet, you have to test out or use A/B testing to see and kind of get a sense of where the right direction is. Once you have a good understanding, then you can move with speed. And I think the same thing is in your outreach strategy, whether you are a job seeker, whether you are a job holder, you want to pivot careers, whether you want to grow in your career, whatever it may be across our audience, you shouldn't just have one outreach template or one way to reach out to people, but you should use A/B testing to see what works best. Once you find that winning strategy, then double down on that. So I love how you mentioned more about A/B testing. And also, I think another good topic to dive into is the job search process is very lonely. And it's very demoralizing, especially as you are getting rejected, and people, I can guarantee you that not everybody, or I think everybody will get a company rejection when they're applying. And I got tons, and I know you got tons as well. But do you recommend job seekers to make it more of a tribe and community feeling, getting people in the trenches with you applying for jobs, or should it be more of an individual approach to getting a job?
I think, in general, to answer your question, it's more so of a tribe. We always rely on our network. We always say this, that the network is our net worth, right? So, when you're in it together, you'll have much more of a support because, to your point, I agree. It's lonely. It's lonely when you get that regret email in the middle of the day, right? We look forward to Mondays and Tuesdays because that's when companies can get access to our resumes and see if we went to the next round of interviews. And it's like, man, I got rejected, and I just keep it under wraps. And that's a part of the loneliness of it all. We're not only getting rejected, but we're staying quiet about it. And we only keeping it to us. And for those who have said, okay, you know what, I've gotten rejected so many times. I've done, so much interviews with this company, and I failed. And then someone saying, man, I failed too. I'm along with you. And it's like, it makes you feel better. And, if it's two of you guys, it's better than just one going through it. And next thing you know, you never know. You have 10 people saying, man, I got rejected too. Now you have a community saying, damn, I got rejected, but okay, so, and someone is trying something else, you kind of bounce ideas off. So I always believe that, your tribe, it makes perfect sense to build with the tribe and work within the trenches, so that way everyone can succeed as well. And there are times where, there may be some things that you have to internalize yourself, but in general, I think it's best to go with the network. And through my anecdotal experience, all the opportunities that I've gotten myself, as far as like working at Columbia, working at ExamOne Quest Diagnostics, it was never going alone and doing the application process alone. It was through a network. So I'm always in favor of just finding people that are like-minded and moving forward. That way you have a support system to fall back on just in case something, goes wrong.
And people might be saying, well, it's very easy, Eli and AJ, to talk about rejection as maybe you are on the summit of your mountain, whatever you're climbing right now. But I think it's important to also talk, Eli, about your rejection resume, maybe just a glimpse of what maybe you've been rejected from. And I saw that you received over 1,500 educational and professional rejections. And I also read that you used this rejection to fuel your professional achievements. So can you talk about, what you've been rejected from and how you use that to get to where you are today?
So I mentioned Columbia. I've gotten rejected at Columbia so many times, actually. And all I need is just one acceptance. And I've gotten in 2018. JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs. I was the math guy that was going into finance and Wall Street. I wanted to get into Wall Street. It didn't happen that way. Then I said, okay, you know what? The techs, Apple, Google, Amazon, Netflix, Spotify, you name it, Facebook, I've gotten rejected there as well. However, if I got rejected at Facebook and I got rejected at LinkedIn, even LinkedIn, but I'm using their platform, I can capitalize off that. I can basically use their platform to turn the tables and have the better outcome for myself. That's how I look at it. So I've gotten rejected. All the companies that you can think of, I've gotten rejected. I've applied everywhere. I've gotten rejected so many times. But all I needed was just one yes. And I always try to figure out, how can I build momentum from my success, the small success, whether it's bigger or small. I want to figure out how I can monetize and not only monetize, but build momentum from that. I got rejected so many times. I mean, you name it. All the schools rejected me. And that's okay. All of the companies that you can think of rejected me. And that's totally fine. But it was a matter of using that experience to my advantage. And I realized that no one is really talking about it up until now. So that's how I turn the tables on my failures as well.
And when you say build momentum, and I want to unpack that for 1 second. I think it's very easy to think, okay, well, if I'm applying for a job, there's only one win, and that one win is getting an offer letter. But I think you should break it down into, instead of just trying to hit a home run, even getting to first base, second base, third base, right? Getting ground double, whatever it may be, is still a small win. And all those small wins accumulate to those larger wins or those home runs. So when you send an outreach message and someone responds, that's a win. When you're able to hop in a call with somebody and take their time, that's a win. When you get an interview, that's a win. And even if you get rejected at the final round interview, it's not a failure. It's just learn from it and go to the next company. And maybe if you're a career professional and you want to grow, thinking about networking internally, even externally, and trying to count the small wins before you do pivot to another industry or another company. So I think that's a great way, like you said, to build momentum. And then are there any other ways, Eli, that you can bend the rules in your favor?
Going back to my original point about having a team around you or having a good network. How I bend the rules using and utilizing other people. So for example, let's look at the application process. When there's a job that is being advertised, we are encouraged to apply and send our resumes. It's traditional. Send our resumes, apply. We get an email back saying, "Hey, we confirmed to see your resume, and we will review all applications and we'll move forward from there." That's the traditional way of doing things. However, perhaps there's a possibility that you may know someone at the other side. We can bend the rules by getting referrals. We can bend the rules by actually visiting the company or the organization. Perhaps there's an opportunity where, you can ask someone that works within the company, "Hey, is there a way I can visit you?" And the possibility is yes or no. If it's yes, then it's like you have an upper advantage. You're basically bending the rules in your favor to gain an upper advantage on a situation that many other people may not have because of your net, because of your connections as well. And I'm an introvert. I'm an introvert to the core. I don't like to socialize with people, but I know that in order for me to bend the rules to my favor, I have to know someone at the other side. I have to know someone that works within the company that I'm very interested in working for, and see if I can gauge their knowledge. I use social media a lot to bend the rules. And this is the A/B testing, because I like to go against the grain, be the outlier, be the anomaly, go against the grain, bend the rules. So that way you have that reputation from your peers and your colleagues saying, "Okay, you know what? You are a professional. However, you can say some things, you can do some things that many people may not do or say because you've done it before." Right. And it's just having the understanding that you may be wrong. However, you're bold enough and brave enough to do things that many people don't think about doing. So that's how I think of bending the rules to my favor.
I think those are such great tips on how to kind of turn the tables and, like you said, bend the rules. And I think that's what you've done, like you said, on social media. And I saw you have a whopping, 350,000 followers just on Instagram alone, which is incredible. And we'll definitely drop a link to all your social media links down below in the show notes. But when you were going through the process of rejection and you got those 1,500 rejections across educational and maybe corporations, how did you stay motivated? I know you said continue to build momentum, build a tribe, use your network, but what are some maybe smaller tips to really keep you going? Because it can be very demoralizing with whatever you're doing when you keep getting a no or getting rejected.
So when I was getting through that process, I think between 2014 and 2000 up until now, I've always said to myself, "Okay, you know what? Those people that have rejected me in the past, they will hear from me in the future. They will hear from me." And it's not a threat or it's not a antagonizing statement against those companies that have rejected me. It's more so of, you're going to know about me. Some way, shape, or form, you're going to know about me. Whether you are worth me or not, you're going to know about me. And there's no hard feelings. I have no hard feelings. If I had hard feelings on all the organizations that have rejected me in the past, I mean, come on. There's no way I can survive here. But it's more so of, you guys who rejected me in the past, all right, no problem. You will know about me in the future. And it's funny because when I share that rejection resume and I'm sharing stories and I'm sharing articles and I've written for, a good decent amount of business publications, and I'm sharing my story, I'm getting feedback from people that work at companies that rejected me saying, "Man, we dropped the ball on this one. We dropped the ball and we could have hired you for this role." And just understanding that it's just knowing that you've heard about me through another capacity. And that's basically my promise that I kept to myself. All of the people that have rejected me in the past, you will hear from me again. And that's what kept me motivated when I was getting rejected so many times, when I was failing classes. And, it's just understanding that at the end of the road, you will hear my story, you will hear my roar. And here we are. And people are gravitating towards that story. And I think that my rejection resume and the story behind it receives more of an impact than the positive stuff that I'm doing. The fact that I'm working at Columbia and I'm teaching students there, that don't really get much attention compared to the rejection resume and my story of failure. And that's what gravitates towards that. That's basically me. That's my story. That's my identity. So just understanding that, those who have rejected me in the past, all the organizations that I failed at, you will hear from me again. And in a positive way, it keeps me motivated to push forward.
And hear your roar they have, because not only have they heard about you, but now you're teaching at Columbia. Maybe they just picked up a book, they finished the book and they said, "Wait a second, this guy's the author. I rejected him a couple of years ago. Maybe they read your articles on Fast Company, Forbes, etc. Maybe they listened to or watched your TED Talk. Maybe they listened to you on the Final Round podcast. And I love how you use that rejection as motivation and fuel to keep going, not in a negative way, not in a harmful way, but in a very positive way, which you have done. So I think those comeback stories are fantastic. And you have obviously had such an incredible story. And I want to talk about dream jobs for a second, because a lot of people focus on one company. They have one dream company, they put it on a pedestal, but just not always really attainable. So what are some reasons why your dream job may be out of reach?
So I have a few reasons why a dream job may be out of reach. The first reason is you may not be the dream candidate for that opportunity that you're going for. You may not be that dream candidate for that role. So that's one reason. And that's okay, right? It's either you may work to become that dream candidate or you may work on other aspects here. And that's why the concept of having a dream job may be out of reach. Another reason why is your goals are constantly changing, right? I thought that I was going to work at Goldman Sachs as an investment banker. That was 5, 10 years ago. Now I have no desire to do it. However, I can work with Goldman Sachs through another capacity, but me being an investment banker and having that dream, that was my dream job at the moment. It's no longer the dream job. So my goals are constantly changing as I go along and as I progress in my career. And on top of that, this is another add-on, is you have to work. People have dreams all the time. And the only way you can dream of something is when you're sleeping. And it doesn't make sense for you to have a dream job when you're sleeping towards, getting that dream. You have to wake up and you have to get to it. So, and when you get to it, you realize that you are attaining your dreams as you are moving. And that's the idea of having, the dream job. And I would rather have a dream purpose rather than a dream job, because a dream job is basically, it constrains you to a corner here. Well, a dream purpose can expand. That's my goal. That's how I envision myself, because if I wanted to attain my dream job as an investment banker, I was not successful at it. And I can look at myself as a failure, or I can move on. I have other goals to attain as well. So that's how I look at it. And that's how I think, when it comes to having a dream job, you may, as far as your goals are constantly changing. And it's another reason why dream jobs may be unattainable is because of the simple fact that if you were to obtain a dream job, are you fulfilled? And you may never know until you get that offer. And if you get that offer and you feel miserable at that job, then the dream job was never that dream of yours in the first place. So those are the reasons why I think dream jobs can be unattainable.
My takeaway from what you just said is that you should have a dream purpose rather than a dream job, because you're sleeping when you're dreaming and you have to wake up and find your purpose. So love what you said about kind of rewriting the definition of a dream job, and maybe don't call it a dream job, but call it that dream purpose, and then finding a job that fulfills that purpose. And one of the last questions for today, Eli, is I understand that you have taught hundreds, if not thousands of students over the years as a faculty member now at Columbia University. And I can only imagine the knowledge that the students have taken away from your classes. But I'd be curious if we flip the table for a second, and if you can share what you have learned from the students.
So one thing I've learned from the students, and it's a part of what I've learned as well, is it's okay to not have a 4.0 GPA. That's what I've learned from the students here. And I think the students that did not do so well in my class, and I've gotten C's and B's, they end up doing great after graduation. They are killing it right now. There's one student in particular, he received a B plus, and he was not happy with the B plus in my class. And it was actually a hard class. It was a statistics course that he took. He received a B plus. And now he is a leader of a $100 million hedge fund. And it's like, you're killing it now. Back then, 5 years ago, you were not happy about a simple grade. And now look at you right now, you're killing it. And that's one thing I've learned from the students. Those who can get their hands dirty and say, okay, you know what? Forget my GPA, right? My GPA is what it is. As long as I receive my degree, and as long as I'm utilizing my degree to move forward. Those are the students that I learned from the most, because they're they fit that DNA of going against that grain, going against that mindset of being perfect and staying perfect and having that 4.0 GPA, rather than just utilizing that education that they receive and serving a purpose moving forward. So that's what I learned from the students. Those who will say, okay, you know what, academic is one thing, but I need to figure out how I can maneuver with this degree. And that's what I've learned from those type of students.
The ironic thing about that example, a great example, is that that student probably listened to this episode of the Final Round podcast because he heard what you said about rejection. And maybe he, in his mind, thought that you rejected him with that, B letter grade, and said, you know what, Professor Joseph is going to hear my roar. And now I'm running $100 million hedge fund, which is so great to see. So thanks for sharing that example. And I think for everybody out there, of course, strive to get a great GPA, but if it doesn't go in your favor, it's not the end of the world. Think about how you can jump off the page, maybe getting involved on campus, maybe networking and getting strategic, because school is just a jumping point to get to that job. And now that person has an incredible job. And it's been so much fun talking with you, Dr. Joseph, on the Final Round podcast. But I have one final question before I will let you go today. And that question is, what is the best piece of advice that you can give to our audience to help them get past the Final Round interview and land a job?
So we know that when it comes to the final rounds, it's all about fit, right? If you fit well with the company and how to gauge your knowledge and understanding of the role that you're about to attain here. But here's one advice that I think is probably, it may be random, but here's one advice I'd like to share with the audience. If something that you thought was impossible, if it's possible to accomplish something that was impossible, then it is possible that nothing is impossible. If you believe that something is possible to accomplish, even if you think that it's impossible, then you've tapped into the notion that nothing is impossible. Some people have it, some people don't, right? Some people lack that mentality. Some people are honing into that mentality, and some people are made of that mentality.
And maybe you got rejected from Columbia, and now you're teaching other students at Columbia. And like you said, it's possible that nothing is impossible. So Dr. Eli Joseph, thank you so much for tuning in and joining us on the Final Round podcast. It was an absolute pleasure. And for our audience to walk away with one thing is get ready for other people to hear your roar, because a rejection is redirection, and go after and get what you want to accomplish. So thank you.